Welcome to the virtual video presentation. It's such a shame that we can't be together again this year, but with any luck, next year we will have live presentations. Today we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's the case for modern search. How we can prevent data errors from occurring and improve patient safety from the very beginning. So please enjoy the video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and we will see you next year for sure. Thank you. Today we're going to discuss the case for modern search. We all know that MPIs are full of errors, and no amount of data scrubbing will ever truly solve this problem. Now, it's not just a human error, but rather we're simply using the wrong technology, the wrong approaches to find patients. So in this presentation, we're going to discuss what modern search is and how it can help us improve patient safety while reducing duplicates and overlays. My formal name is James and my nickname is Jim, and I give both names in these kind of presentations because it's pertinent to the topic. I'm a computer scientist by training. My master's degree is from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. I'm the co-founder of a healthcare IT firm called Medarcus, and we're a healthcare product and services company that produce data-centric solutions that are unsolved by EHRs. Data quality reporting, for example. Advanced data cleanup, fault-tolerant search, we'll talk about today, clinical data clustering, and other interesting areas of healthcare IT. Prior to healthcare, I was in the finance and national security industries, and I spent 10 years working in the research labs at the National Security Agency, doing work that's actually pertinent to what we're talking about today. And finally, I'm the co-chair of the California HIM Association Health Data Integrity Committee, where I'm leading a year-long effort to produce an EMPI toolkit focused on new ideas for keeping EMPIs clean. And modern search is one of those topics. If you have any questions from the presentation at all today, please reach out. You can reach me via Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn at Medarcus. Or direct email works too, jhoover@medarcus.com. Or perhaps even better, let's connect on LinkedIn. Just review some standard disclaimers for the presentation. We've done our best to present a fact-based presentation. It's built from best practices and experience in healthcare IT over numerous years. But the results your organization may get could vary from what we discussed today. So please use any advice we give in the presentation with caution and always with professional assistance. The goals of the presentation are to educate you on new developments in healthcare IT that both improves patient safety and prevents data errors from occurring in the first place. We'll talk about the importance of modern search, what it means for HIM. We'll discuss why do we need modern search, what is modern search, and how ultimately can we get these capabilities in our hospitals. And lastly, once we understand the foundation of modern search, we will review how the technologies underneath can apply elsewhere in our industry. To set the table for our discussion, let's review the top 3 leading causes of death in America. Number 1, heart disease. Second leading cause of death is cancer. And lastly, and surprisingly, it's medical errors. Medical errors include data errors, such as the wrong dosage on medicine, missing data, which is duplicates, wrong patient, which is overlays, and sometimes the wrong data. I discovered one notable death in literature about a patient who was not resuscitated because of a duplicate record. You see, the revocation of his do not resuscitate order was in a newer record, and the attending physician only had the older record. So unfortunately, when the patient passed away, the physician was under the assumption that the patient did not want to be resuscitated, when in fact he did. This is a crazy but true data error, and there are many such stories in industry. There are extreme consequences to data errors in healthcare. A recent Johns Hopkins study found that more than 250,000 Americans die every year from medical mistakes. 250,000. Other studies have estimated that it's upwards of 400,000 or even more. And sadly, 10% of those errors are data related. If you do the math, it's out to be 3.5 deaths per hospital per year because of data errors. This is not something hospitals openly discuss, but it does happen. Many records look alike. Many patients share the same date of birth. 1 out of 366, if you include leap years. And many patients have the same surnames and similar first names, making it very easy to confuse patients. Some patients register with nicknames or have names that are hard to spell, and all of this leads us to the fact that we have many duplicate records in our systems, and sometimes even worse, overlays. The size of our MPIs is growing, the similarity of names increases the magnitude of our data errors. And the larger your MPI, the higher percentage of data errors you're going to have. Studies have shown this. To set the table, we all understand that MPIs have many data errors, and we will show those in the presentation. We will look deeper into the many reasons for data errors, to include people and technology problems, but also systemic problems in linguistics and methodologies for entering data into systems. And really the most important part we will learn today is that other industries have solved similar problems already, but healthcare is behind those industries. And for us to be able to find patients with so many errors we have in our systems, we must adapt as well and implement these modern search solutions for our industry that others have done much better. So let's dig into the content to get a better understanding of the errors, of the technology and people problems, and then how we can solve it with solutions from another industry. Here's the case for modern search. We must acknowledge that many patient records look the same. Family members, people with the same names, twins, common names. And every patient should be unique in the database. That's the goal. That's the requirement. But how confident can we be that the patient record we find is the correct one? And how can we be sure that this record does not belong to another patient? And finally, are we 100% certain we found all of the patient records in the system when we know our system has duplicates? And why is finding patient records so problematic? Why can we not always find our patient records? Consistently, confidently, every time. Most duplicate records are created due to failure to find patients. And this is both a human and technology failure. Why is this a technology failure? Well, it's really kind of simple. EHR search assumes perfect data. both in the MPI itself and in the query typed by the user. It assumes perfect data because this is a text search. If it doesn't match exactly, then the search fails. And it's a huge limitation and the cause for not finding patients. If information is not entered perfectly in the search, or if there's errors in the MPI, the EHR search will not find the patient record. So this is what I call the EHR search missing the mark. So let's try to understand the data errors inside the MPI first. These errors accumulate day by day, they're accidental, and fortunately, no single error is usually catastrophic. But there is the old saying, death by 1,000 cuts. Every misspelling, every address error, every missing piece of information, they all contribute to high duplicate rates, and worse, overlays. The conclusion is apparent. When we have data errors in the MPI, EHRs do not perform well. These data errors lead to search failures, which create duplicate and overlay records. These data errors cause problems with patient care and dramatically impact patient safety, as the Johns Hopkins survey indicates. Our parent organization, AHIMA, and the Healthcare Financial Management Association both say we have industry averages of 8 to 12% duplicate error rates. These numbers are a bit dated, but they're widely quoted today. And both AHIMA and HFMA are quite reputable, so if they measured it, we really should believe those estimates. With an 8% duplicate rate, that means we have a 1 out of 12.5 chance of getting a duplicate record, of getting a partial patient record. And with a 12% duplicate rate, our odds increase to 1 out of 8.3. That's a huge risk of not getting a complete history of the patient's encounters at the provider. And honestly, many providers have even higher duplicate rates. 8 to 12% is just an average. If the duplicate rate increases to 20%, which I've seen many times, that means there's a 1 out of 5 chance that you're going to get part of a patient record, not the complete record. And that's a big risk to patients. These data errors mean we have a high chance of creating additional duplicate records and additional overlays every time we do a patient search. If our data is not actively clean and if we're not using the proper technologies, our error rates continue to climb. And the risk to our patient safety is also climbing. What does this mean in practice, in everyday life at our providers? Duplicate records also put our staff at great risk too. With COVID patients, for example, or any other infectious disease that's noted in the patient records, we cannot afford not to find all the relevant records. If we happen to pick one half of a duplicate record and get the wrong half, that is, the one without the lab results, it puts our frontline healthcare workers and providers at direct risk if we don't know the patient's history. Even in clean MPIs, there's a strong probability of picking a duplicate record. And so patient search really has become a big gamble, if you think about it. So it's an open question for most of us. We don't know how imperfect our data really is. How many errors do we have in our MPIs that give our EHR search problems? One way we could analyze this is looking at error proxies. That is, looking at known addresses to get an estimate of how often they're misspelled, like institutional addresses for the hospital or jail or some clinic that happens to be in the patient's address, for example. And with these error proxies, we can then estimate how many errors we have in the rest of the MPI. One client, for example, we found that they had 262 variants of the same exact location, a clinical affiliated with the hospital. That represented over 10,000 data errors, about 2% of their MPI. That's a huge number that they weren't expecting. And if we're making mistakes in fields we can measure, then we have to assume we're making the same mistakes in patient names and other patient information that we use for identification. And the error types vary. It could be misspellings or typos. And these problems are systemic, industry-wide. Every organization has them. And just for clarity, misspellings and typographical errors are really two different kinds of errors, and we measure them and correct them differently. It's too bad our systems don't have spell check, for example, but they should. Or have auto-completion of addresses, like when we're buying things online, but our EHR should. And these error types are the root cause of why EHR searches fail often. That's why we have duplicates and overlays. You can almost envision a registration clerk under stress typing erroneous information into the wrong fields or misspelling them as they're trying to locate patient records. This situation happens all the time. It's the root cause of data errors. Inaccurate searches and errors in the MPIs. And it's a multifaceted problem, humans and technology. There has been a lot of information published in our industry about duplicate records. It's been going on for a long time. EHRs have been in common use for over 2 decades, and duplicate records have been with us ever since the first 2 patients were entered into the MPI. It's a well-known problem, and the articles are often simply repeating ideas from other articles that had preceded them. The problem persists, but we don't have a permanent long-term solution. And millions of dollars are spent every year at hospitals all across the nation for cleanups. But no one has really solved the core problem, the technology problem. And it's rooted in the EHR search itself. The searches are bad. EHR search is notoriously bad. There was a study in 2016 that found EHRs missed 30 to 90% of the avoidable duplicate records. And it's because EHRs are using technologies from the 1970s and 80s that insist on exact matches. And the reason for this is really quite simple. We're missing records when the search doesn't work. It's creating duplicates. Sometimes we're picking the wrong records because of search, and it's creating overlays. And beyond patient safety, it also might introduce HIPAA violations if we release the information to the wrong patient, either through current ROI procedures or through the new information blocking regulations that go into effect this year. It's fundamental to understand that MPIs are not self-healing. The data does not fix itself. We can't do a show of hands today because we're virtual, but I would almost bet you that very few organizations have active data quality programs. And as a result, these data errors have a very long life cycle inside of our MPIs. Errors are introduced at every step: scheduling, registration, lab techs, clinicians, and even technologists when they merge MPIs, or fail to find the duplicates. And making the matters even worse, making it even harder to find patients, are some records have more than one error, and we're going to call those compound errors. Compound errors dramatically impact patient search and patient matching. And they're quite common in healthcare. Too many errors in one medical record will trip up most matching software, and for sure causes searches to fail when we're looking for data that is incorrect in the MPI. So one way we can improve patient search, improve patient safety, is by making an effort to deep clean our medical records, finding those small little errors, one of the 1,000 cuts, and cleaning them. Because humans are always going to make errors, and errors will persist until we actually do those deep cleanings. And even with deep cleaning, some errors will still persist. And so we have to figure out a way to live with errors and overcome them when we're trying to locate patient records. Let's think about the word monolithic. It's what I think of when I think of EHRs. The word means one stone. It has nothing to do with Stone Ages per se, EHRs that is. Monolithic means one stone. It's big. It's made of one thing. And that's what EHRs really are. It's one giant piece of software that is expected to do a lot of things reasonably well. But like the old saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none, that applies to EHRs. EHRs simply can't be good at every single thing. And that's why we have multiple separate downstream systems. We have systems for labs and finance and dietary, pharmacological, cardiology, radiology, OR, coding. And I'm suggesting that search probably should be one of those downstream systems too, until at least EHR search improves dramatically. That is to say, EHRs adopt modern search. So we have to come to the conclusion that search must work with errors in the MPI. The search must be accurate to prevent overlays and duplicates. Search must be fast. We have no time to spare in busy emergency rooms or scheduling offices. And the search must be user-friendly. Just like internet search. Ask yourself, did anyone ever take a class on how to use Google? Of course not. And that's what our EHR searches should be as well. The searches should also be smart. And just like Google, it knows the context of what we're looking for and gives us pinpoint information. So should EHR search. And I'm going to add a new requirement that search must work with errors in the MPI and errors in typing in the search. That means the search should be fault tolerant. Still work even with errors, because that is our situation in healthcare today. And that defines the two characteristics of what I'm calling modern search: smart and fault tolerant. This means comparisons search should work for all kinds of data errors we discussed earlier. And we should find near matches when the characters are off by a few letters, numbers, or even abbreviations. The search should work with existing typos and misspellings in the MPIs, or in what the user types in search. And it really must work with compound errors. When there's multiple errors in the records, we would still expect modern search to work, just like we expect Google to work under all circumstances. Smart search, like Google, should consider the context. That means it should work when the names are mixed up, like first and last sometimes are in reverse positions. If a name accidentally appears in a middle name versus the first name or a last name, smart search should still work. And smart search should work with nicknames. Bob, Bobby, Rob, Robbie, and all kinds of spellings of each should always match with Robert for the correct patient, albeit with a small score degradation, but they should still match. This applies for patient search and patient record matching too. The nickname guesses for Spanish and English are fairly straightforward because we are familiar with them, but there are many languages with many different nickname potentials that will match a given name, and our smart search should be aware of the context of the name, of what we're doing, to always find the right patient record. Smart search should work with homophones. which is also related to phonetic spellings, or errors made in spelling a name when we're trying to type it as it sounds versus the way it is spelled. And this happens often with non-English names. For example, where we get very poor spellings of a patient's name. An example might be in Chinese the word Xia. The name Xia, Xie, is sometimes spelled S-H-E. And this is almost similar to how the J in Spanish sounds like an H in English, Jose. Even my name Jim, J-I-M, I have seen spelled, interestingly, in EHRs sometimes as G-Y-M. It's surprising. And there are true homophones that the names sound exactly the same but are spelled entirely different. Consider Jeffrey with a G and Jeffrey with a J. And sometimes spelling parts of the address differently also leads to confusion and matching problems. For example, first spelled out F-I-R-S-T, or the ordinal version, number 1, and then S-T afterwards. Sounds exactly the same, but spelled different. And with text matching in EHRs, they are not the same. EHRs are inherently structured for English language characters. So many non-English names present unexpected challenges in patient search and patient matching. Not all names fit into the English construct of first, middle, and last name. There are also issues with first and last name order. And finally, middle names are very problematic in different languages. Some foreign languages, for example, Vietnamese, have multiple middle names. And that gives us trouble with which part of the name goes in which field in EHRs, and can cause search errors. And contrast this to Korean. Usually it has one surname and two first names. There's no concept of a middle name, although in EHRs you see the names spread out in different fields all the time. And that's related to compound names that we see in Spanish, where either the first name or the last name, or both, may have two different names as the actual name. Take this example, Diana Maria Lopez Garcia. Her first name is Diana Maria, and her last name is Lopez Garcia. But yet we can understand there are many possible ways for that name to be entered into the EHR. And that gives registration clerks at hospitals a lot of trouble, which then gives search and matching software even more problems finding patients that have compound names. Sometimes patients register only with one of the names. There are many potential name combinations that make it extremely difficult to predict if a patient with a compound name will be located or not. And that's not even considering nicknames for the first name or misspellings on any of the names. The power of modern search will find a name in any field, no matter where it's located, and considering nicknames and misspellings. And to make things more complicated and difficult for matching, Vietnamese characters are Romanized, so it makes different names actually look the same, even though they are different letters and are pronounced entirely different in Vietnamese. This presents an even more difficult search and matching problem for non-English names. Romanization is a fairly esoteric linguistic concept, but it's directly related to how we spell names, English and non-English names, and the spelling impacts the data quality of our MPI systems. The data quality of our MPI systems is directly related to how well our EHR search works, or in many cases does not work. Modern search takes this into account in how it recognizes the potential for matches. By way of background, romanization is the process of writing a word or name in English letters that come from another language character set. It's incorrect romanization that creates spelling errors. It creates inconsistency for specific patients, whether it's MPI data in the system itself or it's the data that the registration clerk types in to find the patient. A misspelling on either side create problems. And these problems, of course, create duplicate records. And makes it increasingly difficult to find patients. We cannot expect our staff to be linguistic experts, so our software, search and matching software, should be aware of these kind of linguistic issues, these errors. Now, phonetic translations are a partial solution, and many systems have those today, but they don't consider the full linguistic issue. And that's where modern search comes in, and just like internet search, understands a lot more of the context and can infer what the user intended potentially, or what the data potentially should be when trying to find matches and search results. And there are some people that only have one name. There is no standard on how to deal with that. But recommended best practice is to put that sole name in as the last name and put the acronym FNU, first name unknown, in the first name. That's a good best practice to deal with patients with one name. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to define modern search as when search became widespread throughout the internet. Really, when search was widespread throughout the world, since the World Wide Web became popular. I bet you would not even recognize the first version of the web. It came out just after I was getting my computer science career started. And then based on this early version of the web, the entire .com industry exploded. And this is where modern search came from. Google typifies what modern search is now, and it was founded in 1998, almost a decade after the web was formed, about 23 years ago as of this recording. But modern search came even earlier, from Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC, and that was one of the largest companies way back then. And I was a young engineer working there when DEC rolled out a software package called Alta Vista. And I was one of the young engineers who helped install and explore how to use modern search at the National Security Agency way back then. Now that's about the internet and web technologies. But what about IT and healthcare? That's what we're really here to talk about. So let's consider the timeline of web and healthcare IT products technology mixed together. Alta Vista was created in 1995. HIPAA came out in 1996, and that mandated, amongst many things, that consumers, patients, would have the rights to electronic access to their medical records, as well as privacy, of course. 2 years after HIPAA, Google was founded, and modern search really became popular. And modern search really became part of the everyday experience of everyone who used the web. Fast forward to about 10 years later, and the HITECH Act was passed. Modern use of EHRs, EMRs in healthcare. But for some reason, the software, this enterprise software, was using older versions of search, not modern search. And we fast forward another decade later, and the era of EHR interoperability is upon us. That's really going to drive the need for much better patient matching and patient searching as providers link records together, now currently using 30-year-old technology for search and matching. It raises my concern to think it's been 25 years since modern search existed. Why don't we have it? Why do we still use text-based search? This is an oversight a technology oversight with enormous consequences to our patients and our organizations, from risk and patient safety. In my mind, there are two fundamental questions in healthcare related to search that we all should consider. First off, why has it been 2 decades and we still don't have a modern search functionality yet? I really wonder. And second, what would modern search look like if we had it in healthcare today? In other words, what should it do? What would the characteristics be of the modern search? So let's consider that next. Let's turn our attention now to what it means to have search that's fault tolerant, in addition to being smart. Fault tolerant search really should create data standardization on the content and format of the data fields that it's searching. That's called normalization. Very few organizations and EHRs actually normalize their data, that is, standardize it. And comparisons should work even with all the data errors, the near misses, the typings, the misspellings, compound errors. Fault tolerance should be baked into the search so we still find what we're looking for. You have used fault tolerant search before, and that's internet search. It just works. Even when we make mistakes in typing what we're looking for, Google still figures it out and presents it to us. And that's what EHR search should be like. And that's the difference between modern search and EHR search. With modern search on the web, for example, there's hundreds of billions of records, web pages. And EHR search is very small, only 1 to 2 million, typically. EHR search should have the advantage. And with EHR search, we often have the subject of our search sitting right in front of us or on the phone to actually help us find their patient record. Again, EHRs have the advantage. And yet we still have 8 to 12% duplicates because we can't find all of their records, even with their help. And lastly, and just as importantly, EHR search is a really limited domain, so it should be easier to find patient records than, say, web search, where we can find anything in the world. Books, food, music, TV shows, videos, conferences, dictionaries. EHR search should have the advantage. But yet, modern search on internet works so much better than EHR search, despite all the advantages you would think EHR search should have. So let's connect the dots. Medical data is full of errors. We know this. And internet search, modern search, works well with data errors. So the question becomes, what should we use to search medical records? And the answer, of course, is internet search technology. That is modern search. So why is internet search different? Why does it work so much better? Well, the answer is in how it works. EHR search is older and it relies on exact text matches to work. If the search query and what's in the MPI are not exact matches, then the search has failed. We can't find the patient. We create a duplicate. And think about this. As a result of the nature of EHR search, and most other searches for that matter, have you ever noticed how we adapt it? We only type in the minimal amount of information to avoid missing what we're searching for. And I tongue-in-cheek call this the 3-finger search, where many hospitals will have a protocol that type in the bare minimal information to try to find the patient record. Often the first 3 letters of the last name and date of birth to try to find the patient. And that's a problem, because from my limited informal surveys at least, that combination of a few digits of the last name and the date of birth is not unique enough to fully identify a patient. Just about 70% of the time it works. That means we run the risk of duplicates and overlays 30% of the time because we're not finding the exact patient we're looking for because we don't have enough information in the search. Because we're afraid to type too much in because then we won't find the patient because of errors in the MPI or errors in what we type. It's a real conundrum if you think about it. And this three-finger search protocol has evolved really around the limitations of exact text search in EHRs. And unfortunately, it exposes the provider to a higher level of risk of duplicates and overlays. And we can improve this protocol even without modern search. If we just were to search on more unique identifiers in the patient MPIs. One of the best practices I have seen are searching for cell phones and emails rather than partial last names and dates of birth, because cell phones and emails tend to be more unique, but in direct contrast to the three-finger search. And to prevent overlays, ironically, the more information you type, the less likely you're going to find the wrong patient, assuming you have a search that works with fault tolerance. If you're able to fully specify a patient, which is impossible in today's EHR searches, then you could almost be guaranteed to never have an overlay record again, because a fully specified patient would weed out or filter out all the records that don't match that particular set of data. But that's the beauty of modern search. The fault tolerance eliminates the need to worry about getting the search criteria 100% correct, and you'll be amazed at how that works in practice. And this example will show a clear contrast between older EHR searches and what modern search does. While EHR search will fail with just one error, modern search still works, even with many errors in every field. So let's look at a real example that has very, very, very bad data. If we search for this patient's name, Janet Montague, and we reverse the first and last name, and introduce errors in the last name, then errors in the first name, then ultimately errors in the address, errors in the telephone number, date of birth, social security number, errors in every field. It still should not matter for modern search. We should be able to find Janet Montague's record, even with all those errors. That is the beauty of modern search. And we have to explain how it works. Modern search is really about pattern matching, not about text matching. It's very different. With EHR searches, the text has to be exact. But when you're matching patterns, it's got to look similar. And not just in one field, but all the fields. Just enough of the pattern needs to match in order for modern search to work. And that's where the high degree of fault tolerance comes into play. It's built in because of the pattern matching approach. If enough pieces of the pattern match, then we have what we're looking for. And the way this works is really simple in concept. A modern search system will make mathematical profiles of medical records in a similar way that Google, Bing, Yahoo, or other internet searches profile web pages. And these mathematical profiles are really what the patterns in the data are compared against. We can visualize the patterns as these histograms just to kind of visually see where things line up. And this is what modern search does when it's looking for what you requested. And once it finds a pattern that matches, then we have success. Modern search builds these profiles by looking at small snippets of text. And we use these text snippets for the pattern matching comparisons. By breaking down the medical record into small text snippets, modern search can match searches even when there are errors in the data or errors in the search query. It's because the collection of text snippets creates a profile that uniquely identifies the patient record that the fault tolerance of modern search is so powerful. The text does not have to match exactly, it just has to be sort of similar. And this is something that older search technology cannot do, but modern search does and does well. Hence, your positive experience with Google and other internet search tools. These profiles create a powerful fault-tolerant matching capability that you use every day on the internet. And the question is, why are we not using modern search in healthcare to find our patients? The 1970s and 80s EHR technologies just is not enough. And the last thought I want to leave you with today are how we can use this pattern matching capability in other areas of healthcare. It's applicable broadly. Search and patient matching are directly related. So fault-tolerant search will find more patient matches than typical patient matching technologies. Modern search can and should be extended to clinical search. There's nothing special about clinical data as compared to MPI data. The pattern matching approach works with any type of data, including image data. So we should be using modern search for clinical data too, and using clinical data as part of our matching criteria. Not only the blood types, not only the vitals or allergies, but also what is in the patient problem list. What are in the clinical notes? This information should also help us with patient match. Very topical today, but infectious disease tracking also can make use of the pattern matching capabilities so we can find the patients that have been exposed to others potentially from their location data. In population health, we don't have enough time to get into it, but we can use pattern matching to analyze the various factors that would group patients together, such as socioeconomic issues, comorbidities, medicines, attending physicians, demographics. And overlay medical record prevention is a big area where this technology is helpful on the front end, as well as identification on the back end of potential overlay records. Discharge analysis and opioid tracking are other areas that we can apply the technology. And lastly, the new information blocking regulations that are coming into effect this year, 2021. This technology is very, very useful to find patients from queries that you get externally for the records in your EHR. So very broad applicability of pattern matching that is deep inside modern search. So we're reaching the end of the presentation, and it should be obvious to all of us that it's time to change the current state. We have an 8 to 12% data error rate that is growing. It's not going away, it's growing. We have known about most of the types of data errors for a long time, yet we still can't solve the basic problem. We get clues from linguistics about some of the errors and how we might be able to battle them with technology and knowledge. But the most interesting thing to me is that the technology to solve this problem has existed in other industries for a long, long time. Since the 1990s, the dot-com days, when Google was first invented. Other industries have adopted the technology, and so should we. It's time for healthcare to leverage modern search to prevent duplicate records, to prevent overlay records. Failure to do so is putting our organizations and our hospitals at risk. And with that, let's summarize the presentation. So to summarize, we talked about the importance of search in healthcare. And we talked about how older search is contributing to our duplicate and overlay data error problem in industry. That led us to why we need a new modern search. And we talked about examples of modern search that we use every day on the internet. We know that search should be smart and be fault tolerant, and that older EHR searches just don't have the right technology to be either smart or fault tolerant. So as a result, we should look at other industries like internet search to learn how we can do search better in healthcare. We can apply modern search in many different areas of healthcare that we just discussed. And this will improve our patient safety and revenue cycle, interestingly enough, quite dramatically. It's a brand new area for healthcare IT and HIM, but it's important for us to learn about it as we upgrade our systems and insist that we use technology to prevent errors from occurring, rather than just always blaming the front-end healthcare workers entering the data. So let me just close and say thank you for listening to the full hour of the presentation. I hope it was valuable and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me directly, jhoover@MedArcus, or of course on social media, you can reach me at MedArcus. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those accounts are monitored. So reach out to me, happy to have a conversation, and I will see you in person next year. Fingers crossed. Have a great day.